Good morning, fam. I wanted to talk a little bit today about when people that are around you try to steer the narrative in a certain direction. Now, in my specific case, this has been done to me for years now, so I recognize it when it's happening. And all I can say is that when people try to do that to you, when they try to portray you in a certain way based upon the things that they're saying about you, you are not obligated to defend yourself against those things because your actions will clearly display the lack of validity of those types of opinions. And clearly, they are just opinions, and everyone's got them. So don't let other people's wrong narratives about you dictate your need to defend yourself or anything along those lines. I want to talk a little bit about this because as I've been going through my family court journey, I don't even want to say that it's a journey because it's been really just a series of mini and micro and macro traumas, and they have compounded upon each other, and they've caused me all sorts of damage. But I want to talk a little bit about this because, like, some of the things that were presented as evidence that were not substantiated, some of those things called into question whether or not I could successfully take care of my children. And I want to highlight the fact that if I had not been going through a family court conflict, that would have never been brought up. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because in the scope of me parenting my children, I was the one driving them to be babysat, or driving them to school, or picking them up from school, or picking them up from daycare, whatever the case may be. And I wanted to mention this because not only was that a responsibility that I had the majority of their years growing up until the separation and divorce, but I was also tasked with things that I think would be interesting to you. So one thing that was requested that I do several times was to adult sit my ex's stepdad. So his mother paid me a small amount to come and basically babysit a grown adult man because she had to run errands and he had had health complications to where she felt like it was unsafe for him to be there alone. So I was tasked with doing that. Now, if I were in any way legitimately a threat to my children, that request would never have been made. My mother, I was her primary care provider, and she had several valve replacements, several valve repairs through her heart procedures that were necessitated by her having heart issues. I was her primary care provider. If I was inept, incapable in any way of caring for her, then my other family members, my two brothers, would have stepped in to carry that responsibility. And that was never done. I was tasked with that. Even when things got very stressful and I reached out to them in the past and asked them to assist, that was not something that they were willing to do long term. So the majority of that responsibility was on me, and I was okay with that. I'm the eldest. I was her, and also I am her only daughter. She's got two sons and I am her daughter. So I understand that it's very typical for females to be given the caretaking responsibility. Now, having said that, there was no compensation. I did not receive compensation in the scope of caring for my mother for years. And I mention that because there is this expectation that my labor is not something that I should be compensated for because I am a female. I don't care if you disagree with that perspective. That was my life experience. Now, granted, I'm sure that is not the same in every situation for every female. My case might be an isolated incident. But from the research I've done into economics, it seems to be that women's labor is taken for granted and is assumed to be something that they're just going to do without compensation. So I want to talk a little bit about this because as a result of everything that happened to me in the family court proceeding and everything else surrounding that whole dynamic, I was left financially devastated by everything that happened. I've talked previously about the fraud that has taken place in my case, and it is extensive. I haven't even gotten into all of the details about the level and the extent of the fraud, and it's still ongoing. There are still aspects of this fraud that there are people that are trying to enforce certain things upon me or penalize me, but I'm here to say that from the initial incident of fraud in my case, from the initial incident, everything else is rendered a nullity. That means everything. Every judge decision beyond that initial incident of fraud becomes a nullity, because you can't compound a case based upon an initial incident that is fraudulent. You can't continue that narrative, and you can't continue enforcement actions based upon a nullity or fraud. You can't enforce any sort of enforcement action on a person when you don't even maintain financial records, but that's supposedly what you're enforcing. So you don't have financial records. You've said so much in the clerk's office, and yet you're trying to penalize me. You're threatening my safety and my freedom when you don't even have the financials to validate your claim. This is something that I've spoken to the circuit clerk of court and also Oliver Hill Juvenile Domestic Relations Clerk of Court about the lack of validity of what they're trying to do. So I'm going to name their names now because I've given them ample opportunity to do the right thing, and apparently they think they can just send documentation back, that they don't have to file it properly, that they're taking paperwork and stamping it into the paper file but failing to upload it into the electronic record. So I want to make it understood that I know that what you're doing is cheating the legal record of its proper content, and that you are subject to criminal prosecution for that. I'm going to name names now because I've already mentioned to these people that they are going to be named in a federal lawsuit for fraud, because I've given them the opportunity to resolve the fraud that they helped to facilitate, and they have not done so. So in circuit court, the person I spoke to recently is Edward Jewett. The person I spoke to at Oliver Hill Juvenile Domestic Relations was a couple of different people, but one of them was Felicia Edmonds Rustin, and they have both been advised that they are going to be named as parties in a lawsuit because they are helping to facilitate and perpetrate fraud. The most recent filing, which was actually from several years ago, isn't even a party to the case. And they're trying an enforcement action against me when the person that brought forth that supposed claim isn't even a party to the case. This is just a means to attempt to continue to labor traffic me. And I'm not consenting. I am not complying. You can try to do whatever you want to do to me. I'm not going to go along with your fraudulent narrative. And you can call me whatever you want to call me. You can say whatever you want to about my mental health. You can make whatever false claims you want to. The bottom line is that you are only trying to undermine me because you know that the power you're trying to enforce upon me is fraudulent, is unlawful, and you're trying to assert yourself in a position of dominance over me because you know that what you're doing is criminal behavior. And the only way you can try to make your bullshit stick is to try to tear me down. You are going to be facing federal charges for trafficking in persons if you keep fucking with me. F-A-F-O. I suggest that you don't.